My name is Seraphine Vale, and before everything fell apart, before my name became a warning whispered in fearful breaths, I was a warlock unlike any that had walked the mortal plane in centuries. People used to speak my name with trembling awe or with envy sharp enough to draw blood. I could command fire with a snap of my fingers, bend shadows into shapes that obeyed me like silent soldiers, and bargain with spirits older than empires. Once I thought myself untouchable, more than human, more than flesh. Magic felt like destiny, like something that had always been waiting inside me, sleeping beneath my ribs until I was bold enough to call it forward. There was a time when my world was made of limitless possibility. I remember the first spell I ever cast, how the world around me reacted, not with fear, but with recognition, as if the universe knew me, as if the air itself had been waiting for my command. The rush of power was intoxicating, overwhelming, almost too much for one body to contain. I had expected fear or regret. Instead, I felt only hunger, a need that burrowed deep, whispering, more. You can take more. Magic was never gentle with me, and I never wanted it to be. I didn't crave safety. I craved supremacy. I chased power not because the world wronged me, but because I believed I was meant to change it, reshape it, rule it. Every night I searched for ancient texts, lost rituals, and forgotten sigils. Every discovery sharpened me. Every spell made me feel less like a girl and more like a force carved out of smoke and starlight. People think magic is beautiful. They imagine glittering lights, floating books, mysteries softened by wonder. But real magic, the kind I wielded, was a storm with teeth. It took from me long before it ever gave. I sacrificed sleep, blood, innocence, and the fragile softness of being human. In exchange, magic wrapped itself around me like a second skin, and I let it harden me until I barely remembered what warmth felt like. There were nights when the spirits I bound would whisper warnings through the veil, subtle, cryptic, unsettling. They spoke in ancient dialects, languages older than language itself, and though I couldn't always translate their words, the intention was unmistakable. Power taken carries a cost. Still, I turned away from their warnings, convinced that I was different, destined, immune. I laughed at the idea of consequences. I thought nothing, no god, no demon, no forgotten law of the universe, could ever strip me of what I had earned. But arrogance is a slow poison. It tastes like triumph at first, sweet, heady, irresistible. Only later do you feel it curdle inside you. Looking back, I can see every sign I ignored, the flickering wards, the silent nights where even spirits refused to speak, the way spells began to resist me like wild animals unimpressed with their tamer. I thought it was a test of will. I didn't realize it was a warning. If I had known then what I know now, if I had understood the danger of seeking what was never meant to be found, I might have walked away. I might have chosen rest over conquest. But I was Seraphine Vale, the warlock who could command death and negotiate with nightmares. And it was that certainty, that delusion, that led me to the verses that would unravel everything I was, everything I built, everything I believed I could become. And once I spoke them aloud, nothing was ever the same again. I didn't stumble into magic the way fairy tales pretend, no ancient prophecy waiting for me, no mentor guiding my steps, no destiny carved into stars. I pursued it, I hunted it, I reached for power with a hunger that bordered on obsession long before I ever understood what it truly meant to wield it. I remember the first time I felt the faint pull of energy beneath the surface of the world, like a pulse hidden under soil and stone. It wasn't warm or welcoming, not the soft glow of harmless sorcery that children dream about. It felt cold, sharp, alive, and it recognized me. That was the moment everything changed. Most people would have flinched away from something so unsettling, but I leaned closer. I wanted to know more. I grew up believing power was something given, earned through loyalty, obedience, or lineage. But magic taught me something else entirely. Power could be taken. And the moment I realized that, every boundary I once respected dissolved. At first, it was curiosity, simple experiments, harmless spells, little manipulations of the natural world, a candle flame bending at my breathless command, a locked door clicking open without a key, someone's thoughts shifting under the weight of a whispered suggestion. The thrill was indescribable. It was as if the universe was clay and I was finally learning how to shape it. But magic is never content in small doses. It grows inside you, a restless animal demanding more risk, more daring, more sacrifice. And I gave it everything. I sought grimoires not meant for mortal hands, pages inked in languages that hurt to read, sigils carved by long-dead sorcerers whose names had been erased for a reason. The deeper I went, the more the world around me changed. Shadows grew longer in my presence. Fire felt familiar, like a friend. Spirits, cold, ancient, merciless, turned their gaze toward me with curiosity instead of contempt. I knew then that I had crossed a threshold most never reached. My mother sensed the shift before anyone else. She wasn't a witch, not in the magical sense, but she carried an intuition sharper than any blade. She would stand in the doorway, watching me with a mixture of worry and resignation, as if she already knew that no warning she offered would save me from myself. "Magic taken," she said once, voice trembling just enough for me to notice, "always demands a repayment. Remember that." I nodded, pretending I cared, pretending I still needed her guidance. But inside, I was already somewhere else, lost in the seductive pull of power. The first time I summoned a spirit, I was trembling, not with fear, but with anticipation. The room grew colder, the air thicker, and every instinct in my body screamed to run. But I held my ground. The spirit materialized like smoke given form, eyes older than time itself. It didn't bow, it didn't greet me. It simply stared, measuring me, evaluating whether I was a fool, a threat, or something in between. And when it finally spoke, its voice reverberated through bone and blood. "You dare." Those two words ignited something inside me, a fierce, unshakable certainty. I wasn't a girl experimenting anymore. I was someone who could command the impossible. That was the moment I realized I was no longer chasing magic. Magic was beginning to claim me. The day I found the book, nothing felt unusual at first. No dark omen clung to the air. No whispering spirits warned me to turn away. It was almost laughably mundane, the kind of quiet afternoon one forgets. I had wandered into the old cathedral archives, not because I expected to find anything extraordinary, but because I'd already exhausted every other place knowledge dared to hide from me. The cathedral itself was ancient, sinking into age like a tired king. Dust-coated marble pillars, sunlight filtered through cracked stained glass, and the silence felt heavy enough to press against the bones. But I knew better than to be fooled by decay. Power often disguises itself as ruin. I remember running my fingers along the spines of brittle tomes, parchment scrolls, forgotten hymns, and half-burned manuscripts that no one had touched in decades. Nothing called out to me, not the way true magic does. But just as I was about to leave, something shifted. Not a sound, not a voice, but a feeling. A tug, subtle yet undeniable, like a thread pulling tight in the center of my chest. My steps slowed, guided not by logic but instinct, and I followed that invisible pull to a shelf tucked behind broken stone and collapsed timber. There, resting beneath layers of soot and neglect, sat a single leather-bound volume. It didn't glow or hum or radiate danger, nothing so theatrical. It simply existed with an unsettling kind of certainty, as if it had been waiting for me. The leather was dark, aged to near blackness, and marked with a symbol I didn't recognize, a circle intersected by jagged lines, harsh and deliberate, like a warning carved instead of drawn. When I touched it, the cold that spread through me wasn't fear, it was recognition. The book responded. The air stilled. Every candle in the cathedral flickered and went out, plunging the room into shadow. Even then, even in the silence that followed, I didn't step back. I opened it. The pages weren't made of paper. They felt almost organic, smooth, textured, unsettling. The ink didn't sit still. It pulsed faintly, as though breathing. I couldn't read the first page immediately. The language was ancient, older than any magic I had studied, older than the spirits I had bargained with. But the moment my eyes traced the symbols, something sharp sparked inside my skull, painful, dizzying, followed by clarity. The letters rearranged themselves in my mind, not translating, but imprinting meaning directly into me. These words unmake what the unworthy have claimed. The sentence wasn't a threat, it was a truth. It felt absolute, final, inevitable. As I turned the pages, I found verses, not incantations of power, but dismantling, undoing, silence where magic once lived. Every line felt heavier than the last, steeped in authority that defied defiance. Some of the verses were smeared as though someone had tried to erase them, not to protect the world from the book, but to protect the book from the world. I should have closed it then. I should have recognized the dread coiling beneath my excitement. But desire is blinding, and my hunger for knowledge outweighed every instinct, screaming that some doors should never be opened. So I took the book, not carefully, not reverently, but possessively. And the moment it left its resting place, the cathedral trembled, not violently, but mournfully, like a sigh exhaled by something ancient and betrayed. I convinced myself I had discovered a weapon. I never imagined it would become the means of my undoing. I didn't speak the verses immediately. For days I merely studied them, obsessed, enthralled, terrified in the quiet places of myself I refused to acknowledge. The book never felt passive in my possession. It pulsed faintly, as though containing a heartbeat not its own. When I slept, I dreamed of symbols swirling like stars collapsing into a void. When I woke, the book would be open, not where I had left it, but to a new page as though guiding me, or warning me. I still don't know which. The night I finally read the verses aloud wasn't a night chosen by logic. It was instinct or compulsion. The sky was clear at dusk, but as twilight deepened, clouds formed with unnatural speed, thick and low, turning the world unnervingly dark. The air felt heavy, humming with energy, not magic, not the familiar current I once commanded, but something deeper, something that existed before spellcraft was ever discovered. My familiar, a shadow creature bound to me by ritual and blood, paced restlessly across the room, its form flickering as though it struggled to remain solid. Its unease should have stopped me, but obsession had already devoured hesitation. I lit a circle of black candles, each flame steady despite the rising wind outside. The book rested in the center of my work table, its cover warm beneath my fingertips. The symbol etched into the leather now glowed faintly, veins of crimson light tracing the harsh design as though reacting to my touch. My voice trembled, not with fear, but anticipation, as I read the title of the first verse. The language still wasn't familiar, not truly, yet it flowed from my mouth with unnatural ease, as though I had spoken it long before this lifetime. The instant the first line left my tongue, something in the room shifted. The candles dimmed, and a pressure built behind my ribs, heavy, invasive, like invisible hands gripping my lungs. Still, I continued. The second verse tore through the silence like a blade dragging through silk. Power, my power, stirred around me, then recoiled. The wards etched into my home flickered and sputtered like dying embers. My familiar hissed, its form dissolving into smoke before vanishing entirely. I felt a sharp pang in my chest, loss, emptiness, but it only fueled me to continue. By the fourth line, every spirit bound to my will ripped free. I felt them leave. Not gently, not like prisoners freed, but violently, each one tearing threads of magic from me as they severed the chains I once forged. My knees buckled, but I refused to stop. The words had momentum now, each syllable pulling the next forward, unstoppable as a falling star. When I reached the final verse, the world went utterly silent. No wind, no candlelight, no heartbeat, not mine, not the universe's. The air froze. My breath turned to frost before dissipating, and then the verse left me, not spoken but unleashed. Light, white, blinding, merciless, exploded outward as though the world itself cracked open. The force hurled me backward, slamming me onto the cold floor. I felt every layer of magic inside me unravel. First the fiery pulse of elemental spells, then the cold strength of shadowcraft, then the ancient language I once shared with spirits. My veins burned, my skin chilled, and something inside me, something I had believed eternal, snapped. When the silence returned, it wasn't peaceful. It was emptiness, vast, echoing, absolute. I tried to summon flame. Nothing. I whispered a shadow binding. Nothing. My magic, my power, my identity was gone. And the book, once glowing with terrible authority, now lay still and lifeless on the floor, as though nothing had ever happened. I thought losing my magic would feel like relief. A weight lifted, a storm passed, the freedom to breathe again. But relief never came. Instead, it felt as though the world had shifted beneath me, leaving me unmoored, fragile, a vessel emptied of its vital force. The shadows that once clung to me like allies now recoiled from my presence, leaving corners of my home unnaturally bright and exposed. Every lock, every door, every object I once bent with a gesture now demanded effort, keys, or force I no longer possessed. The mundane world pressed in with the weight of reality I had once been able to reshape at will, and it was unbearable. Even walking through the streets, I could feel the subtle, judgmental gaze of things unseen, spirits, creatures, energies that had once obeyed me, now circling like predators, testing the strength of a wounded animal. Sleep brought no comfort. I awoke drenched in sweat, my heart pounding as whispers slithered through the cracks of my apartment, murmurs I couldn't place, threats I couldn't fully understand. Shadows moved where they shouldn't have. Cold fingers grazed my skin in the dark, teasing, reminding me that the world I had commanded so easily was now an indifferent, sometimes hostile place. Even when I tried to ignore them, the memory of power, its rhythm in my veins, the effortless command I once held, haunted me. It left phantom aches in my chest, phantom burns in my hands, the absence of something I could no longer touch, but could never forget. People who had once feared me now looked at me as if I were diminished. Colleagues, scholars, and rivals alike sensed the shift, though none could name it. They whispered behind my back, their eyes sharp with unspoken questions. What happened to Seraphine Vale, the warlock who held fire and shadow in her hands, the one who bargained with spirits and lived beyond mortal reach? They didn't need answers. Absence tells its own story, and mine roared louder than any spell ever could. I tried to perform simple charms, small wards, incantations I had repeated countless times without thought. The words left my lips hollow, meaningless. Objects I had once moved with a glance refused me. Flames would not bend, shadows would not stir. Even the familiar rhythms of energy, the subtle pulse beneath the skin that had once guided me like a compass, were gone, leaving me stranded in a world that still held magic, but no longer recognized me as part of it. I was human in every way, painfully mortal, and yet the memory of my former self clung like a second skin I could not shed. And worse, the absence of power did not erase the consequences of having once wielded it. Spirits I had enslaved, bargains I had made, debts I had incurred, they remembered, they waited. Sometimes I felt them in the corner of my vision, glimpses of shapes I had once called allies, now scrutinizing me with predatory patience. I had thought I could walk away from it all, but the world does not forgive a warlock so easily. Even powerless, I remained a target, a mark, a story whispered among entities who do not forget. Life without magic was not simpler. It was raw, unprotected, exposed. I had traded invincibility for vulnerability, command for helplessness, and yet even that vulnerability carried a weight I could not shrug off. I had believed power made me whole. I had been wrong. It had defined me, and without it, the definition of Seraphine Vale hung in the balance, uncertain and trembling. The echoes of what I had lost followed me everywhere, reminders that I had changed the world and that the world was not finished with me. I tell this story because someone will find those verses again. I know it. I've seen it in the way curiosity works, in the way desire creeps into the hearts of those who believe themselves untouchable. Magic is seductive. It whispers promises of invincibility, of knowledge beyond mortal reach, and the verses I destroyed myself with are no exception. They lie in wait, patient and cold, and someone someday will come across them, thinking themselves clever enough to control what I could not. I am telling you my story so that you understand something I could not grasp until it was too late. Power is never a gift. It is a responsibility, a weight, a wound that runs deeper than flesh and blood. And the moment you believe you are above it, that is the moment it begins to unmake you. I want you to understand that I am not recounting a tale of regret out of fear. I am recounting it out of truth. For years, I believed that mastery over magic defined who I was. I thought that the spells I cast, the spirits I commanded, and the shadows that followed me were the essence of my identity, but they were only extensions, fragile reflections of something far larger than I could contain. Losing them did not strip away my ability to live. It stripped away the illusion of control I had clung to so desperately. And when the illusion shattered, I was left with nothing but the raw, unbearable reality of myself, human in ways I had long forgotten. I know people will imagine that power is a tool to wield, a key to doors that should remain locked. They will convince themselves that, like me, they are the exception, that rules do not apply to those who are clever, bold, or determined enough. But power does not forgive. It does not bend to confidence, nor to brilliance, nor to arrogance. It only asks for what it is owed, and when the debt is unpaid, it collects in ways that cannot be reversed. I speak from memory, from experience, from a place where the echoes of what I once commanded linger like ghosts I can neither see nor touch. Perhaps I tell this story as a warning, perhaps as a confession, perhaps because in telling it, I am still reaching for understanding, still trying to make sense of a force that once defined me and now haunts me. You may read my words and think you understand, but understanding comes only with knowing the pull, the hunger, the intoxicating rush of something beyond comprehension. And once you have felt it, you cannot unfeel it. Once you have wielded it, even for a moment, the memory clings, shaping who you are and who you will become. So I tell it to you, not as a lesson in heroism or caution in cowardice, but as a reflection of the cost of believing oneself untouchable. Power is seductive, yes, but it is also corrosive. It leaves marks on the soul long after the flames die, long after shadows retreat, long after the spirits you commanded vanish back into the void. And for anyone who seeks it, you must remember the world does not give power lightly, and it does not take it away quietly. I survived, but survival is only the beginning of reckoning. I tell it because someone must know that magic is never neutral. It is a living, breathing force, and to touch it is to invite both greatness and ruin, and I can no longer bear to remain silent about the ruin. Even now, years after the verses unmade everything I held dear, I feel the residue of what I once was. It is not magic in the sense of flame or shadow or spirits answering to my command. It is something quieter, more insidious, more alive. A pulse beneath my skin, a tremor in the air around me, a memory of power that refuses to die. I feel it in the corners of rooms, in the spaces between words, in the way the night stretches long and tense before dawn. It is the echo of a warlock, the ghost of a life lived on the edge of omnipotence, and it is calling me, or perhaps calling itself, back into being. And I cannot tell where it ends and I begin. Sometimes I sense eyes on me that do not belong to this world. I hear whispers on the wind, old voices, familiar and alien, bending to a rhythm I cannot quite grasp. They are neither benevolent nor malevolent. They are waiting, watching, testing. The book, the verses, the power I destroyed, they have not vanished. They have merely lain dormant, dormant like a seed beneath frozen soil, waiting for heat, for motion, for me, or for someone else. I do not know if it is mercy or malice that allows me to live in this fragile shell, haunted by what I was. Perhaps the verses themselves are patient, knowing that power cannot truly be destroyed, only delayed, only buried until the moment it chooses to rise again. And there are nights when I am tempted, moments when the memory of flame dancing on my fingertips, shadows curving to my will, and spirits bending beneath my gaze calls louder than caution. I imagine reading the verses again, not to destroy, but to reclaim, to feel that intoxicating rush of creation and command. My heart races at the thought, but every instinct, every fragment of reason left in me reminds me that magic is never forgiving, that the universe does not allow a hand to reach too far without consequence. And yet, even knowing this, I feel it stir, something ancient, something patient, something relentless. It waits for the right words, the right moment, the right weakness. And I wonder if I am the one being tested, or if I have merely become the gatekeeper of a power that will outlast me. I walk among the living, but I am shadowed by what was, by what might return. Ordinary life seems dull and muted, as if the world itself mourns what I lost. I touch objects with my hands, and they feel foreign, inert, unresponsive. I speak, and my voice carries no authority. Yet in the stillness of night, in the silence after all else has gone, I feel it, a spark, a pulse, a heartbeat not entirely my own. Something wants to rise. Something remembers me, remembers my command, remembers the warlock I once was. And I know deep in the marrow of my bones that this is not an ending. It is a pause, a breath drawn between the last act and the one yet to come. I am no longer the master of magic, yet I am bound to it. I destroyed what I held, yet it clings to me, patient, unyielding, waiting. The verses that should have silenced all power instead left a wound that still bleeds with possibility. And now, with every step I take, every word I speak, every shadow I pass through, I feel the quiet stirrings of something immense, something that does not belong to this world entirely. I do not know what it will demand or what it will become, or whether I am ready to face it. I only know that it waits. It always waits. And so I tell you this, not as a warning, not as confession, not even as plea. I tell you this because the story is not mine alone, because the force that moves through me is larger than my fears, larger than my regrets, larger than time itself. It is waiting for an answer. It is waiting for reckoning, and it is not patient forever. Something is stirring, something alive, something relentless, something that remembers Seraphine Vale. And now the question remains, what will you do when it finds you?